Welcome to the Kids with Big Emotions podcast. I am your host, Andi Clark, and we are on episode 98, which is super exciting. And today we're talking about something that has been something that I've had to work through a lot in my life. And it's where we think differently. When your child or you feels misunderstood a lot in your life growing up. Have you ever watched your child and thought, why do they see things so differently? Why does their brain seem to work in ways that others just don't get it? Maybe they ask deep questions that no one else seems to care about. Maybe they're told they talk too much or overthink everything. Maybe they feel emotions so strongly that the world tells them that they're quote unquote too sensitive. Or maybe I'm talking about you as a child. I know for me, it was where I would ask a lot of questions and frustration would be the reaction that I would get when I truly was curious. I wanted to know how to rebuild the engine of a car. I wanted to know what nuts and bolts and things I needed to use to fix and do, and just everything around the house. I wanted to learn all the stuff in nature. I just always wanted to learn. I always had questions. I always asked why. And I know I have a child now that constantly asks why. And he, before I pulled him from school, would come home upset and be like, why? Why do I have to sit there while they're all doing this thing in class? And like, I'm already doing way ahead of this. And I'd be like, I don't know. Honestly, my kid asks why about breaking the mold, being outside the box, asking so many questions. And he's also very, very in the moment that there's times where I find myself saying, why to myself? Why does he have to explode for everything? Why does everything have to become big? And I do that at times. And this is my own child when this was done to me. And it's hard being on the receiving end sometimes. I'm not going to deny it. Today, I want us to put our shoes in the person that is doing it. I really want to talk about what it really means to be a deep thinker, to see the world differently, to feel the world differently, and to process things in a way that others don't always understand. And if your child experiences this too, or if this is you, this episode will help you see your child more clearly and maybe even help you understand yourself more. By the end of this episode, I'm really hoping that you will have either a new perspective or just feel validated for why some kids struggle to fit in the box and why that's really not a problem. It's a gift. And hopefully you'll gain insights on how to support your child in a world that doesn't always make space for different, doesn't always make space for this other way of thinking, for thinking outside the box, for doing things different, for doing things bigger or smaller, and letting them be them. If you've ever been told that you or your child should just stop overthinking things or just focus or just be like everyone else, then this episode may bring up some feelings. And I promise that there's nothing wrong with thinking differently. There's only a need for better understanding. I so believe deep down in my heart that these are the kids that are going to change the world. And when you step into your superpower, these kids step into their superpower and own it. Oh, they're just what we need to think differently in order to make change in this world. So let's start reframing how we see our deep thinkers, big feelers, and outside of the box kids, because they definitely are not broken and we don't need to break them. I do feel like I was broken as a child. And I am hoping that if you felt that way, or if your kids are feeling that way, that we can change that with this episode. So let's start with how the world doesn't understand how your child thinks. Different doesn't mean wrong. Some kids don't sit still. They move, they fidget, they pace. They can't seem to focus the way we should, sitting down quietly at a desk, not moving. Whereas some people do their best focus moving around. We do our best focus when we're in the shower. We do our best focus when we're going for walks. Like, it's just fascinating to me that we expect that there should only be one way. Yes, some people do sit very quietly and focus and get everything done, but some need to have movement. My one child, we have a trampoline in the backyard, and that has saved me so much. Even during dinner, there were years and years and years where in the middle of dinner, we would be like, why don't you just go jump for a bit? Go jump, go do 20 jumps, go do 20 split jumps, go do a this and this jump, or go throw 20 baskets in the trampoline basketball and come back. And it'll be so much easier for you to eat dinner. And he would, and he'd come back and he'd be able to sit and eat with us. Same thing when he's doing his work. Go and do this, right? Go around the block. Let's go on the street and let's go run down to the stop sign and run back. I'll beat you in doing it and then go do the next question. And then he can think, then he can do. Is there something wrong with him needing that? No, he has energy to burn. What's wrong with having extra energy? A lot of us are so low in energy and struggling to move, right? And then we have the kids that seem like they're not paying attention, but in reality, they're really lost in thought. They might be creating, they might be imagining, they might be seeing connections where others like are oblivious to connections. And these are the ones too where it's fascinating. My one child, his last year of school, he got the Silent but Deadly Award. And the teacher learned throughout that year that he didn't often raise his hand. He didn't often, speak up to answer questions. But when she called on him, his answers were very interesting. They were sometimes profound. They were connecting things other people hadn't connected. They were connecting things she hadn't connected. They were thinking of things in such a way that were so astute, though he rarely speaks. When you do ask him to speak, you're like, wow, what this child is thinking is amazing. And when we ask him questions too, we have to sometimes, quite often actually, with him, I have to make sure that we definitely have his attention, because he will say to me, yep, got it. And he has no clue what I just said. So we have to make sure, and I could get very angry at him. I could get upset at him in school. He would miss certain things at times because he's thinking about what was just said. He got into such a deep thought over what had just been said that he misses the next thing. Thing though is that's his superpower. This kid is going to go places with the way that his brain thinks and links things and puts things together. And I could put that part of him down so he doesn't realize it's his superpower and he doesn't go out and make an impact in the world. Or I can say, hey, stop for a sec. I have a question to ask you. Can you stop and look at me in the eyes? And I have to wait. Sometimes I have to stop. Sometimes he's in the middle of thought. He's learned to say, just give me 30 seconds. I need to finish what I'm thinking. I'm like, okay. And then he's ready to look at me and go, okay, what is it you wanted to say? It's really learning how to work, because we used to get mad at him. We used to yell at him. And this kid would be so, you could see it in his eyes. He is not a kid that is defiant. My other child, very defiant. This is a child that is not defiant. This is a child that wants to do the right thing all of the time. And when he misses things we say, and if we get upset and yell at him, he feels he's a bad person. And he is furthest thing from a bad person. This child is the most thoughtful, caring, kind, curious kid you'll meet. Not crazy, curious, not in the way that he asks questions, but the way that he observes the world. And we could really look at these kids that aren't seeming like they're paying attention as and they miss marks in school because they may miss things that are said and miss some learnings. Though if we start working with it instead of against it, we can really change the way that these kids are thinking. And some kids plan far ahead. They anticipate things way before they happen. And people tell them they worry too much. Like my other child often will be like, what are we doing tomorrow? What's the plan for this weekend? What are we doing at this time? What's happening after that? What are we doing? He likes to know so he can plan and think about it and think of all the contingencies and what may happen. And it's fascinating because if we think about his father is in a job with the police. He's in emergency management. He is the one that does like active attacker plans. He's the one that does all of these emergency plans for weather, for if there is ever like a tornado, hurricane. any, mass casualty disaster, he is the one that works with a team. He works with fire, he works with EMS, and they sit there and figure out all of the contingencies, all of the plans, all of the things that may or may not occur that they need to figure out. How do we handle if this happens? With all of these things, like, he does all of these emergency management plans because he has that brain. Now, that is also the brain that can overanalyze and get into an anxiety with worrying about so many things. And that's where we have to teach them, this is your superpower. And this is where we can help you on the other side to support you so it doesn't move into that anxiety, move into that, all of those like big worrying spirals. And we think of this, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, there's so many careers. Think of almost any career out there, doctors, nurses. We think of any entrepreneur career, any business career. They need people that can really think ahead and think of all of the things that may or may not happen. And if they can do that in such an expansive way, they can really help you plan and navigate and mitigate things. So these are all these superpowers that, because they think these way, and yes, they have these bigger reactions. They may have these huge outbursts. They may have anxiety, panic attacks. The thing is if we just teach them how to focus more, we just teach them how to not have panic attacks, we teach them how to sit still more, we may be taking away the ability for these kids' superpowers to shine. And quite often when somebody is so strong in something, there's usually a deficit on the other side. And so we always need to think of the yin and yang, the pro and the con. And quite often we move more to the con because it does bring out those big feelings in us as parents, the frustration and all of that thing, where we may not have the bandwidth to work with that individual at that moment in time, where how they're reacting is frustrating us. And we think of the con. We need to fix this and change this in them, and thinking like, oh, wow, is this their superpower as well? Is this how this child is going to really change the world? And then we may have kids too that are highly perceptive. They may pick up on things that others miss. These subtle shifts in people's emotions, in the tensions in a room, the unsaid things in conversations, that can hit their nervous system. That can hit them as traumas. They may be able to tell when people around them are worried and nervous and have imposter syndrome, but they may think it's all on themselves. And if we start teaching them to be able to separate, okay, these are other people's issues, other things, it's what's going on for them. And this is how reading a room can really bring a superpower for you, but also give you the protections. I know when I was working with responders, I needed to really make sure that I had those protections for myself when I was hearing about the tragic calls that they did go to and the traumas that they had experienced. Because I can feel, I have this way of knowing what questions to ask somebody without them giving me information in order to get the information out that I need. Thing though is that means I'm feeling what they're feeling in order to know those things. And so you need to figure out these ways of how to protect yourself, yet how can I use this in order to benefit and help people and make that change in the world? Being told that they're too sensitive when in reality they're feeling things too deeply. Maybe they're constantly scanning, analyzing, predicting what will happen next because their brain naturally looks for patterns. My one son that needs to know everything, he is phenomenal with trends and with Pokemon cards. He can tell when a new set's coming out and he knows what sets are coming out. And he's like, okay, that's going to be taking over for this card that is a high value. Well, high value being a $5, $10 card. So he will go in and trade his $5, $10 cards in, knowing that the value is going to drop when this new set comes in because a new card's going to take over for it and it will decrease the value. Like, he can see these things already. He's been doing this. He's 11 now. He's been doing this since he's been 8, 9 years old. That's how this kid makes money, is by trading and buying his Pokemon cards, by watching the sets that are coming out next and knowing when the price is about to drop and selling it before that. Like, so I've been working with him with how the market works, which is the free app of where we as a family, as a homeschooling group, have $100,000 in the stock market, and we're all learning how to work trends and stuff. So we can start seeing these things as, okay, this does get you struggles with change. You struggle with going into new situations because of how much you're constantly scanning and analyzing and predicting what will happen next. How can we make this into a superpower? And we get these misinterpretations when a kid is constantly moving and isn't, like, we start thinking they're disruptive. when they really need to move. They're not trying to be bad. They have this extra energy in them that needs to move. A child who gets lost in thought isn't ignoring you. They might be processing layers and layers of information at once. And a child who worries, they might not be overreacting. They might just really be seeing possibilities that others don't. And that's the thing, like often we go through life constantly being told that the way that your brain works is wrong and that you need to sit still. You need to stop thinking so much, stop asking why, stop feeling so deeply. That's the reality for so many kids. Well, the amazing kids that I work with, the amazing kids that my kids are friends with, the people that are usually in my social network. This is often something that we have in common. And that's because we didn't fit into a box. And when you don't fit into a box, some people, they can get uncomfortable. People fear what they don't understand. And when people see the world differently, it can make others uncomfortable and they can try to stop people from making different decisions or going out in the world and doing the things they want to do or thinking the way that they want to think. Kids who think outside the box often make adults nervous because they don't just follow the rules, they question them. This is my one son. As I was saying this earlier, he questions everything. He questions rules. He does not, just because somebody is in an authoritative manner, and I just said my husband's an officer, he does not, because somebody is an elder, an adult, if they are being, how do I say, a not nice person, so many choice words I wanted to say there, but this is PG. When they're saying about like being a not nice person, I just make sure like he won't respect them. He won't do as they're saying. If what they're asking them to do does not make sense in his mind, and they're just telling him to do it because that's how it's always been done, versus how, if it's not the most efficient way to him, he doesn't really see why we have to do that. That's a waste of time. Why do we have to do this that way? And sometimes it is where I have to get out my tools and figure out, okay, but this way isn't wrong. It's just different. And he's struggling to see the different way. And that's where I need to work and help him with his cognitive flexibility of seeing different ways of doing things. At the same time, I believe that not just blindly believing what anybody or doing what anybody says is a good thing. I feel I am not a political person in any way, shape, or form. And the one reason I'm not is because I don't believe in one party completely, ever. I believe that whoever is running for that party is going to run that party different than the last person did. There's always things that I do believe that one party is doing and other things that another party is doing, because I don't ever believe that it's just one box, one category, one everything. There's so many factors involved in politics, even. And there are so many people that just because they feel that they should be a part of one party, they become blind to the direction that's going. Like, how far in debt is that party getting you, or what certain decisions that they're making on certain things? Do you believe 100% of them? And it's okay to vote for a party and not believe 100% in everything that they stand for if you believe in it more than what the other party is. And to also like stand up and say, I voted for this person, although I don't believe in this one thing that they're doing or this other thing that they're doing. I do like this and this that they're doing. Like, this is the outside of the box. This is me, right? I don't believe that anything should ever be black or white. I don't believe that anything should ever be right or wrong. Well, certain things are right or wrong. Certain things should be. Violence, all of those things, right? Like, there's certain things, yes. But we really need to still listen to the other side before, like, yeah, domestic violence, all those things. Like, there's never a reason for it. It's never right. At the same time, the reason why the person is doing those things is because of traumas and things from their past and stories. It does not excuse what they did, but we also don't dive into things deep enough. See, this is me getting in deep and going down a rabbit hole and things, right? And this is where I do believe that nothing is just where we don't just follow the rules. That's where I segued into that one. Sorry, guys. This is where my brain goes, and this is how I was growing up. And now I own it. And I love the way that I can go down these deep rabbit holes and really think outside the box and really think deeply into a subject as to why is something happening, which is why I love working with these kids with big emotions too, because we can figure the why out and dive into what really is causing these big emotions in this child? What really is causing these things in them? And how can we help them from there instead of it just being like, stop doing that behavior? Because I don't like to follow the rules. And that's what we were kind of brought up with, that piece of being like, you shouldn't do this. The child's not necessarily doing it on purpose. They're struggling with anxiety and they're nervous or they're worried or they're angry or they're mad or they struggle to stop yelling or lashing out. And we need to find out the why in order to help them. Just telling them to stop it is not going to happen. And that's where that following the rules, respect for people is where a lot of these kids do question those things. Kids who feel deeply can make people uncomfortable because they bring up emotions that most of us have learned to push down. And that's it. Like things that I just spoke about might have given you some emotions. And I go so deep and I'm so open to hearing other people's thoughts and stories and their views on things, as long as they're open to an open conversation on both sides where we can both openly ask questions of one another, learn the other side and see it and really go deep down into it. Not where somebody wants to just tell me that my side is wrong and this is why. That's where I really struggle with. And that's one of the following the rules, respect for other people that I've always struggled with. And that will get me angry. Well, sorry, that used to get me angry and upset and where I would yell at somebody. I have learned through time, like long time ago, that doesn't work to get somebody that I've actually learned how to use crucial conversation skills, how to really use skills in order to be able to have those really tough dialogues, have those tough conversations with people where we do really see opposite sides of the spectrum and for both of us to learn from one another. And that's a superpower. So many people like to just stay in the box, stay in their lane, stay with their view. And if we can learn to bring out those things in our superpowers, it can just make such a world of difference. When we have these messages from people, we start to internalize things as a child. And this is what happened to me. And this is what became traumas for me is when, well, for me, it wasn't always being told things. It was just that I was annoying people or people would just switch the subject when I'd be talking. Now, does that mean that everybody has to sit and listen to me going down deep rabbit holes? No, but you can politely chat to somebody and go, hey, you know what? You've been chatting about this for a while. Not sure it's my topic of interest so much. Can we now switch to something that I'd like to talk about? And you can listen now, right? Like teaching me that would have been good too, so that I know when to stop or when it's over somebody's head as well. They're probably not going to say, which is what I did learn about. I don't know if this is fully true, but some people that I was surrounded about, they didn't have the learning opportunities I've had. They didn't have access to all the books and the computers and the learning and the audiobooks and the podcasts for me to be diving down these deep rabbit holes and learning all these things. So the capabilities weren't there for them. So they may not be able to keep up, not even because they can't keep up, but they didn't have the exposure to all the things that I am learning and doing. And so I have to understand too, that not everybody's going to say, hey, I really don't understand what you're talking about, that I have to be cognizant of their emotions as well. But when I was younger, I took it all as rejection. All of it as rejection. And it became a lot of traumas, me feeling that I wasn't good enough or smart enough or not worth anyone's time. And those really played a big part on me. There's other things that you may have been told. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Why do you always have to question everything? Okay, I did hear that one. Can't you just be like everyone else? There's so many things that you may be sitting here right now as you're listening to this, thinking of things that were said to you as a child, or things that you may be saying to your child right now that you're like, oh, if my child hears this message, they may start to believe that something is wrong with them. Or you may have started to believe that something was wrong with you, like I did, that your way of thinking is a problem. I definitely did. And I want you to say that if you are noticing right now that this is something that you do for your child, I am so proud of you for acknowledging that, because I know that you listening to this and acknowledging that means that you can now take that next step to help your child and to change what you're saying and to nurture them and bring out their superpowers. You can parent in a different way now that you've acknowledged that. And that makes you an amazing parent because you are open and willing to hear the hard things, to be vulnerable with yourself and to be there to help your kid. And I just think you're an amazing parent because of that. So do not at all shame yourself if you have been saying things to your kids that you were unaware of. That shame is not going to help fix that relationship with your child. That shame is not going to help change your parenting style. You can totally do that right now by switching up how you are speaking to them. I also do support people in my support circle. The link is in the show notes. And yeah, in that membership is where I can help you as well. I can support you. When that shame kicks in, the other parents in the group too can tell you that the shame does not need to be there, that you are an amazing parent. The fact that you're in the group and doing everything that you can in order to support your kids says so much about you. And as parents, we all make mistakes. As parents, we are all going to do things that are going to affect our kids negatively. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much we know, we are going to. So the key is giving our kids the tools to be able to acknowledge when we do those things and be able to have the tools and the knowledge of how to help themselves when we do mess up. Because we are all going to mess up. And it's important to let our kids know that we're going to mess up, for them to also be okay with then being okay with fixing it and letting us know as well on the other side. And when we try to fix these kids, they start shrinking themselves to fit in. I know I did. They stop asking questions. They stop sharing their deep thoughts. They suppress their sensitivity. This was me. I'm 50. And I'm going to tell you, this was me up until about a year or two ago, till I really worked through these things. I stopped asking questions. I stopped sharing my deep thoughts. And I really suppressed my sensitivity and didn't own it. And through the last 2 years, I've learned to own it. And oh my God, it's so amazing and so freeing. And I'm realizing that I am a good person, and it's okay that I dive deep, and that I'm neurodiverse, and that I'm just this awkward person in some social situations. And that's all okay, because that is my superpower as well. And I've learned to own it. But it's only been when I was 48 years old is when I started even learning and diving into how to heal that. So if wherever you are in your journey, you can totally work on those things. The saddest part of all of this when we try to fix our kids is they lose touch with who they really are. And like I said, I've only started realizing who I am in the last 2 years. And I love who I am now. I'm a cool person, but I didn't think I was. And that stopped so many opportunities in my life. It stifled so much. It made so many different decisions in my life than I make now. And so if this was you growing up, know that you can work on it, and it's never too late to work on it. And if you are seeing that light decrease in your kids, we can bring it out in them. We can totally do that. And it's okay. We'll all be okay, because there's always tools that we can give, that we can use to repair our damage. What if we didn't try to change our kids? What if instead we help them understand and embrace the way their brains worked? I was just in Puerto Rico. I was speaking. I'll be honest, I was terrified before I went. It was with tech CEOs who built these really big companies and sold them. And it was funny because the one guy was talking about, he was on this trip, he was kite surfing. And the guy was asking him, what are you here? He goes, I'm here for a conference. He goes, well, what do you guys talk about? He goes, what's it for? He goes, tech CEOs that have exited or sold their company. He goes, what do you talk about? And he goes, basically, we complain about having too much money, and what are we going to do with it? And then we've got all these ideas in order to go in all these directions. And I was so intimidated going into this. And oh my God, they were all my people. They were amazing. They had these neurodiverse brains. Hilariously, though, none of them knew what neurodiverse brains were. And it was the guy who runs this. Oh my gosh, the rabbit holes he goes down, the deep dives into things, just such a phenomenal guy. And he attracts all of these other amazing people into this group and their spouses. So there were about 25 or 30 of them. I think there was 36 of them, I think, or something like that, with the spouses. The most supportive spouses, male and females. And it was just amazing. And I mentioned something to him at the end of the day, at the end of the weekend, where they were so welcoming and inviting to me. I said to him that it takes leadership in order to bring in all these people and these minds. I'm like, these minds where everyone can go down a rabbit hole. And he's like, well, I don't know any different. And his wife, or no, he didn't say that. His wife said, He's like, he actually doesn't realize that there are people that aren't like this out there because this is all he surrounds himself with. And that's why these tech CEOs are all so successful, is because that's who they surrounded themselves with, was other neurodiverse people, other people that loved going down rabbit holes, other people that don't sit still, that don't think. I mean, this one guy that did this whole thing on financial psychology that everybody goes and talks to him about, like the stock market and stuff. He didn't finish high school. He said, he's like, I was high all of like high school, grade 11. He goes, I was high all through high school. I skipped school all the time. I didn't make it through school. He just is constantly going. His brain never stops. And he didn't pass high school. And he's like this, I don't know, millionaire, billionaire, and the nicest guys with the most amazing brains. And that's it. These guys grew up. They understood and embraced the way their brains worked. They may not have even understood it, but they embraced it and built businesses on it and grew them. And many of them did have a lot of failed businesses before they had their success. They were not an instant success, overnight success. Then they were very open and candid and honest about that, about the trials and tribulations they had. They're just such amazing people because they embraced the way that their brains worked. And so the first step in understanding and supporting our kids who think differently is really recognizing that it's not a flaw. We have been just taught in our lives the way that things should be, the box we should be in, how you should perform in school, how you should act in school, that you should just sit there and listen to the teacher and do as you're told when you're told, and you should never move around, and you should always just be able to focus on whatever they're telling you instead of being in your own world, or you shouldn't go down these deep rabbit holes because we're not ready for it. That's a grade 6 thing and you're in grade 3 or even higher. I don't know. It's just, these are not flaws. You're outside the box. And because of that too, we feel that these kids should be quieter, or these kids should be louder, or they're focused more. And so we really are trying to put them in that box. And these kids are getting trouble at school because they're not in that box. And then we start figuring out, how do we parent? How do we support this child that's always getting like stuck in school or noted to being a problem child, when you also see this brilliance in them, and it's frustrating and it's hard, and because you really have to go against the grain. Your child's deep thinking, their movements, their perceptiveness, it's not a weakness. It's how their brain is wired. And once we start acknowledging how their brain is wired and how it's different, we can come up with different solutions. So instead of asking, how do I get them to stop? We start asking, how do I support them? Right? How do I support this child? Instead of yelling out, stop that, or you need to change this, you need to fix this. How do we support this child to bring this as being their superpower? So there are some practical ways to support a deep thinker or a big feeler. So kids who seem distracted, instead of telling them to focus, give them movement. Some kids and adults actually process better while pacing or doodling. If you want to have a deep conversation, like with one of my kids, it is give him a doodle pad, like do crayons or something, or go for a walk. When he's in movement, I can have much better, deeper conversations, and he actually listens. For kids who overthink, help them find an outlet. Journaling, talking through ideas. Maybe they can have a podcast. I mean, this podcast totally came because of all the stuff that I'm always learning and doing and getting it out there in that world. So now I have somebody to share it with that actually wants to listen, right? I'm able to share it. And if I can share all of my experiences, my lived experiences with my kids, and working through all of this with the responders I've worked with on stress systems and sleep and neurodiversities and the way these brains think different and how to support them and my childhood and my traumas and things that I've worked through. Oh my gosh, like if I can help somebody, so worth it. It's so amazing. There's so many things. Create something with their hands, create something that they can do for these outlets. Like kids who love to take things apart, go to, I'm thinking Salvation Army, Value Village, I don't know what you call this, used stores where people just drop off the donation stuff, and go buy alarm clocks, go buy computers and give it to the kid. These are the things they can take apart. Take it apart, see if you can put it back together. All the electronics that they can. Like, think about all these things that they can be doing to expand themselves if they like overthink. Kids who feel everything, teach them that their sensitivities is not a weakness. help them name their emotions and recognize that feeling deep is a gift, not a burden. Learning about empaths. That was a huge one for me, was learning about empaths. I had no idea what this was. And there was something with one of my kids, and somebody was like, oh, that's an empath trait. I'm like, what's an empath? And I started Googling it and learning about it. And then I read the Empath Survival Guide. That book was great in helping me understand how to support them. And then I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. Also, highly sensitive child. And that's by Dr. Elaine Aron, Aaron. I'll put both of those in the show notes, but those are things that have helped me with my sensitive child and realizing that about my sensitivities. And I remember I did it in audio. I did highly sensitive child on audiobook. I do everything in audio because I don't sit long enough to read. And when I was doing that, I remember my kids, we were eating breakfast and they'd be listening. They go, hey, that's me. The other would be like, hey, I do that. They were so excited to hear that a book was talking about things that they do from a sensitive, highly sensitive person perspective. And for any adults too, I would only recommend the child book. I tried the adult book and it got a little dry because the thing is if you're highly sensitive, you were as a child, and you probably felt so misunderstood that when I read that book, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense as to a lot of things I didn't understand about myself as a child. For kids who ask hard questions, encourage their curiosity instead of shutting it down. Let them explore ideas, even if they seem big for the age. This is where, like, I love ChatGPT. I'll go in and go, okay, start asking. You want to ask all about the subject? Just start asking ChatGPT. Now, know that ChatGPT might be wrong on some of these things, but you can start going down big rabbit holes. And then if you really want to find out the true facts and the not facts, then we can start really researching it, going into research papers and all of that stuff. But that's how I get them started on things as well. And we'll just Google it. There are times too where at the dinner table, we'll just start asking Siri questions and they love it. And we can go down so many rabbit holes. It's awesome. Like, it's just so amazing. So when we support instead of suppressed, these kids become confident in who they are. They learn to navigate their emotions and thoughts in a healthy way. They stop seeing themselves as too much and start seeing themselves as exactly enough. And they start stepping into their superpowers so that they can change the world. Us as well. I'm truly feeling that I'm 50 now, and I feel like I have more confidence in who I am. I'm able to navigate my emotions in a healthy way. I don't see myself as too much. I see myself as exactly enough for those that are ready for me. And that's okay. And that is what is taking the imposter syndrome away and allowing me to speak my truths in this podcast and how I'm able to help my clients better. When I'm working with these kids too, I can bring out more of their superpowers because I am okay with mine. So as parents too, we need to work through our own struggles from being put in a box in order to be able to help our kids better. So the next time that you see your child thinking deeply, pacing back and forth, can't sit still, or the teacher's getting them in trouble for that, they're feeling things intensely or questioning and everything, pause. And instead of seeing this as something to fix, see it as something to understand. Think back to your own childhood. Were you ever told to tone it down or sit down or stop thinking too much? What if you had been supported differently instead? Or for those of you that were supported differently, how did that impact you? And let's imagine what's possible if we give that gift to our child. And I'm not saying this is easy by any means. There's so many social norms we need to get out of the way. There's a lot of things with our school and the way that schools are run that we are going to constantly be battling, where they want to make changes to your child, where you may find that your child is perfectly enough as they are and they're doing okay and they're not the disruptive child. They just need to move, and they're not accommodating for a child that needs to move. I understand there's going to be so many loopholes. A lot of times too, we're going to get judgment from neighbors and family, all of these people that don't understand, and that's okay. That's where I offer all of that real hands-on support in navigating your child's emotions, deep thinking, outside of the box way to see the world, in my support circle. It's where parents like you come together to learn, to grow, and get the tools that you need to support your child. And they're not the same for every child. They're always different. and help them grow in a way that actually works. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Join the support circle today. The link is in the show notes. And I can't wait to support you inside. If this episode resonated with you, fire me off a DM. DM me, come into the support circle and let me know. Email me. I would love to hear if this episode meant something to you, if you felt something from it. It is hard for me speaking to a screen. I don't always know what you are thinking. Just know that you are not alone in this. And I would love to help and support you any way that you need the help and the support. However you need the support, I'm here to support you, and I am in your corner.